Sequels. They're nothing new, and like many things, they're not created equal. Some are loved, some
Get
are
down.
loathed. And then there's some that are kind of forgotten about and kicked to the side and sort of over the top. People just don't like them. Well, I'm here to give you 10 sequels that need some love. Alright, so number 10, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Now, I was hesitant to put this on here, but because it has an 85% rating, and I always thought it was loved. When it was part of the trilogy, it certainly was. Now, there's another sequel, we'll not talk about that, but constantly, I always heard people run down Temple of Doom just because it was the least of the trilogy, but it was still a really good adventure film. I don't see what's wrong with it. I actually like Short Round. He's one of the few movie kids that I actually didn't want to punch in the face when I was younger. Alright, so next one, Die Harder. Die Hard 2, Die Harder, John McClane, Ghost on the Airport. Now this one's a little contrived, I think, which is why Vengeance is a better sequel, because Vengeance seemed like a sequel that actually connected to the first film, as in John McClane put things in motion which caused that film, those events to happen. Whereas Die Harder is a massive coincidence. He happens to walk in. There's people taking over a bigger building. It's Christmas again. Yeah, it's a little hard to swallow, but it's a good little action movie, and probably one of the best 80s or early 90s actually action movies. But it's kind of swept aside as Die Hard 2. What's that one? Is that the one where he's in an airport? Alright, next one, The Lost World. Jurassic Park, The Lost World. Now, as I've grown up, I see the faults in it. Some of the dialogue's really bad in this film, I think. Some of the forced character arcs are a little off, but it's got amazing special effects. It's a totally different thing from the first film. The first one was a park, and then the second one, they're like in this obvious Lost World callback to Conan Doyle's The Lost World. It's a great adventure film. And perhaps the ending that people don't like. I like it when the T-Rex is just, trashing the city and stuff. And I don't know. I don't see the problem with it. I mean, Jeff Goldblum. You've got more Jeff Goldblum. I mean, what's wrong with that for a start? The more Bloom, the better. Right, next one. This one is the one that most people seem to dislike. Ghostbusters 2. What's wrong with Ghostbusters 2? They come back. There's a river of slime. Dan Aykroyd, they're all back. I don't even know why I just shouted Dan Aykroyd's name, but I did. The effects are amazing. The comedy works again. It's not as good as the first one, of course it's not, but it is a good installment. It's like another adventure, the next thing that they have to deal with. It's like this really weird, where Dan Aykroyd got that stuff. I mean, what part of his brain? Because you think about it, when people talk about ghosts, you think maybe Poltergeist or Casper, and he's got like a river of slime that has charged with negative thoughts, that a painting's gone, like it's just madness, and it's just the sort of stuff that we want to see more of. It's a total original thing. So the next one, talking about the end of a trilogy, Alien 3, hated. Everybody hates this film. Oh my god, this is the prison and there's no guns and it's not aliens again. Of course it's not aliens again. Aliens wasn't Alien. It's a downer. It's a downbeat film. It's a very dark film. It seems to me like a great end to a trilogy. Unfortunately, it kept going, but I don't even hate the next one that came. I understand why some people don't like it in terms of, well, she saved Newt in Aliens and then she's dead, and it feels like, well, what was the point in that? It's kind of like, why did they bother, destroying Cyberdyne in Terminator 2 when the war happens anyway? But practically, the little girl that played Newt would have been older, yet if she was in cryostasis, she would have to not age, so they would have to get around that. Killing off Hicks, I don't like the killed off Hicks. And now again, I'm not saying these films are great. I'm not saying they're 10 out of 10. I'm just saying they don't deserve the hatred they get. And I think Alien 3 is a solid horror science fiction film. It was a really interesting ending to that series because she kills herself and it's such a downbeat, disturbing film. And even though David Fincher had his hands tied by Fox, which is something that still happens to this day, he still injected a lot of that David Fincher style into it, which is what I love about all the Alien films. Is Alien, Aliens, Alien 3, and even Alien Resurrection. They all brought on board these great creative talents who just made each film their own. Each Alien film is so different, and that's what makes it an interesting series. rather than just the same thing over and over again. So yeah, stop hating on Alien 3. And what's the director's cut as well? Anyway, the next one on my list, here's one that some people probably never even seen, and some people probably laugh at me, but it has to go up here because it needs some love. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. I absolutely loved the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2. In fact, for a long time I liked it more than the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 1, which is kind of blasphemy amongst horror fans, I would assume. But let me explain. I always loved the grounded film that a lot of these series started with, and that happened with action films and horror. And even sometimes they weren't action; they were just like thrillers that became action films. So if you look at First Blood, you look at the first Dirty Harry, the first Death Wish, they were grounded. Even the first Rocky, and then they started to get a bit larger in life. Now with horror films, they did that a bit faster. They tend to go from serious, it's meant to be scary, right? But I look at the Texas Chainsaw Massacre 2 the same way I look at Evil Dead 2, or I look at like Friday the 13th Part 6, or a lot of these other films, Phantasm 2, that just became these funny, dark comedies. And I like the Leatherface in this. As I say, it's more in the vein of like Evil Dead 2 or one of the Jason films and that. And the series went off the rails after this. Texas Chainsaw Massacre 3 is unwatchable, but this is a cool little film, and it even has the original writer and director Tobe Hooper come back. I think as a black horror comedy, just a piece of fun, I think it's worth a watch. Here's another one that I'm surprised is here, but it's only got 33%, and I've heard other people talk it down. Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls. What the hell, people? Ace Ventura: When Nature Calls is 33% and is hated. I was, what? This was one of the first Jim Carrey films I ever seen when I was little. I used to laugh my ass off at it. It's and I was watching a butchered BBFC cut of it. I wasn't even seeing the uncut version. It's funny. It's Ace Ventura. He comes out of Rhino's ass. What? Next on my list, one that I have had to actually get over because I initially hated this film too for the same reason as many other people. But Halloween 3, Season of the Witch. Lots of people hated on this film. They wanted more Michael Myers. Now it's funny that I mentioned previously about the Jason films and the Freddy films, where they became icons. So people wanted to see more of them. They wanted to see it become more black comedy and kind of phoned in sort of films. And I love those films. I love those films. Right. But Halloween 3 was a really interesting idea because John Carpenter, who produced the film and did the score for it, I believe, wanted to do an anthology series. So what he was going to do was each year, or maybe every other year, he was going to make a Halloween film. It'd be a film set at Halloween, only it'd be a different thing each time, and it'd be a horror film. So this one was completely different from the first two Halloweens, because the first two Halloweens were slashers. This was going to be a more creepy sort of witchcraft film. Was going to be, it was. And like many people, it didn't have Michael Myers in it. So when I first saw it when I was like 13, I was like, what's this shit? I don't want to see this. My God, where's Michael Myers? But now that I rewatched it in my adult years, I go, this is a really creepy film, very well shot. It has such a Carpenter feel to it, like a John Carpenter horror movie, which 4, 5, and 6 and H2O and all those other ones don't have that feel to them. They just have a sort of straight to video, get this out in the video shops as soon as we possibly can. Let's not even bother spending money on a decent mask feel to them. And to an extent, I like them as well before people call hate on that. But Halloween 3, maybe they should have released it as just Season of the Witch, John Carpenter's Season of the Witch, and people would hate it less, but I still think is worthy of your time. The next one on my list, another one that I didn't realise people hated this film, and that's Robocop 2. Robocop 2 gets a lot of flack because people think it's Robocop 3, I think, because whenever they talk about it, they talk about it being cartoonish and cheesy, toned down. This film isn't toned down. This is the one with Kane. Now, the robot in it is really cool. Now, as I said, to go back to the first Robocop, many ways was an anti-action film. It's one of those ones where it kind of pretends to be something it's not, and a lot of people don't get the joke that it was a satire of 80s business. It was a satire of action films. It was a satire of American culture, much like many of Paul Verhoeven's films, like Starship Troopers. But it had all it had all these underlines, had all the crazy adverts and all this, and had the hyper violence. Robocop 2 has that too. It has the hyper violence. It goes in a more standard action film route. It is not as deep as the first one, but it still has a lot of things in there. It has stuff in it about censorship, which relates to the actual film industry itself. There's stuff about, consumerism. There's stuff about capitalism, and it has a fucking cool robot fight as well, because Kane, or Robocop 2 is the name of the film, is one of the coolest robots I think in film history, and the fight at the end is amazing. So get over it. And number one on my list, the sequel that I think needs the most love, and once again, it was one that I used to not like, Predator 2. Again, I can't believe this only has 25% on Rotten Tomatoes. 25% for Predator 2. It has a great cast, it has a good story, it furthers the universe. What is wrong with this? There's great action scenes in it, great musical score. I think Danny Glover is great in it. I mean, people must have like, what, you're replacing Arnold Schwarzenegger with the guy from Lethal Weapon? But he's good, and he's good as a cop. He's not a super soldier, he's a cop. And the way they moved it, they just changed everything up. And I like the fact that the Predator movies went to being, about the creature rather than the character. Because often with these films, like Jaws or Tremors, these monster films where you just feel like, similar to what I was saying about Die Hard, why does this keep happening to the same person? So why would another Predator come and find Arnold Schwarzenegger? He's dealt with it, he's moved on. The predators are still around. They're going to do the same thing. They look for heat and conflict, and they track down what they perceive to be skilled predator prey. And the cast is great, as I said. Danny Glover. You've got Bill Paxton. Any film with Bill Paxton needs some love. Gary Busey, and Bill Paxton in a film, and Danny Glover's leading it. And it's a 90s action film, quasi-futuristic because at the time it was in the future. The Predator looks fucking great. The way they progress the whole universe, those guys that are hunting the predators and everything, the Jamaican voodoo gangs. What is not to like about fucking Predator 2? And what are some sequels you think need some love? Back to the Future 3, Wayne's World 2, Death Wish 3, Crank 2. I don't know. There's all these other sequels out there that just have this love for them that, or sorry, this hate that I don't think they necessarily need.